Today we welcome 3 candidates for 2 seats on the Madison School Board. Candidates will have 4 minutes for opening remarks to use as they desire, either to introduce themselves, to provide us with pertinent personal and professional background, perhaps outline the main reasons for seeking office, or briefly discuss a major issue in the campaign. Following their remarks, we will move to a closing round where each will have 3 minutes. Unfortunately, we will not have time for questions. If you would like to ask a question of a specific candidate, please feel free to stop by the head table immediately following the meeting. Our timekeeper today is Juan Lopez. Juan. He will alert the candidates when they have 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then he'll give the stop signal. We'll now move to the opening round. The candidates will appear in alphabetical order by last name, and we will hear first from seat 6 candidates, Ali Muldrow and Kate Taves. And yes, I did pronounce it correctly, Taves. Okay. After their opening remarks, we will hear from seat 7 candidate Nikki Vandermeulen. While Rotarian Ed Hughes was also a candidate for seat 7, he has suspended his campaign last week due to his wife's illness. I'll now call Ali up to the podium to begin the opening round of comments.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be running. It's been impossible for me as I've pursued being a member of the school board to not think about all of the people who haven't had these opportunities throughout history and what it means to reconcile that as part of my candidacy is to be tremendously grateful for the chance to have a seat at the table, for the chance to be heard, for the chance to stand in front of all of you today. I'm running for school board for the love of learning. I'm running for school board because I'm from Madison. I was born here. I was raised here. I attended Madison schools from kindergarten to graduation. And so did my brothers and sisters and my nephew. My little sister is at East High School right now, so go Pergolders. But I have been deeply committed to education my entire adult life. When I left East High School, I had started a club. It was a spoken word club, and it allowed folks to create art together as a community. And when I left, the teachers who were working with that club asked if I would come back and facilitate that club. And so I've been working with MMSD since I was 19 years old, and to this very day, I work in partnership with the Madison Public Schools. I facilitate a course called Foundations of Leadership at the University of Wisconsin that pools students from all over the Madison area to develop their leadership. I always explain leadership as an orientation of the imagination. We're looking at the way things are, the way they have always been, and we are challenging ourselves to do things differently. We have to do that. We've arrived at that moment where we have to separate ourselves from a history of not serving every single student equally, not providing an excellent education to all students. We have the capacity and the drive to do that as a community. But it's an all hands on deck moment. And I see the role of the school board as this liaison between the community and the school district, this vehicle to allow people to speak to the things that impact them and their children and help us define the way we treat young people and the way we educate young people and the opportunities we provide for young people. We talk a lot in our community about racial disparities and the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. And often when we talk about that, we talk about the negative impacts of things like youth incarceration or suspension or expulsion. We talk about exclusionary practices. But what we leave out of that conversation is inclusionary practices for everything in our community that is overrepresentative of students of color. We have something that is underrepresentative of students of color. We have advanced learners opportunities that are not being extended to students with disabilities. We have study abroad. We have theater programs that don't allow equal access to all students. And I aim to reconcile that by inspiring our community to be what it hasn't been before. We don't need a master of a broken system. We need people who can imagine our district working really differently. We have the opportunity to create schools that allow all young people to be successful, that allow all young people to have access to the best parts of themselves. And I want to make our schools places where our children go to fall in love with learning. And I think that's really about maintaining the integrity of the education that we provide. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ali. Now we will welcome Kate Taves.
Hey folks, my name is Kate Taves, and I'm running for school board because I deeply believe in our public education system. I have 3 young children. My oldest is a first grader in the district right now, and they need public schools right now more than ever. This moment in our country is relying on our public education system as one of the only places where people who are different from one another still mix. And I deeply believe it is the way we will fight back against the inequality and the intolerance in our nation. But our schools are facing threats that they have never seen before. We have a state government and a federal government who intend to defund the system, to take money from public schools, give them to private schools. And make no mistake, their intention is to break apart our district. If Tony Evers loses in April, I believe we will be facing that here in Madison. I think we have several major challenges that we need to address. And I think we need real leadership on the school board with the experience to make the hard choices, to do the hard listening, and to take us to a place that can not only fight back against privatization, but also build something better, right? So I've spent the last decade in the business world. I worked at McKinsey. I ran a startup here that serves food for senior citizens. I've also worked in urban schools. I worked in the Boston Public School District at a school with 1,500 high school students, and I ran a peer mediation program. Here's my vision for our district. First, I think that we have the ability to be one of the best districts in the country. We are a well-funded school district. We have $450 million that we spend every year on our schools. It's about 80% more than average. Right? We have an engaged community. Look at this room right now. We have an engaged business world, engaged families, fantastic teachers. We have the right pieces of the puzzle to lead the way forward into something that the rest of the country can look at and say, that's how you do urban education, right? But we have to get it right, and I don't think that's been happening. So first, on privatization, this is a national threat. This is a state threat. We are in the crosshairs. I don't think that our school district has taken the leadership we need to. We have a responsibility to form a coalition to fight back against what we know is coming. And I also see choices being made in our district right now that I fundamentally disagree with. Last month, our school district made a choice to fund a private school and give that private school public money. Predominantly white students attend this private school right now. I don't believe this is the right choice for our students, and it will be taking money from the rest of our schools, right? If we're going to use charters, we need to be using them carefully. We need to be putting money where we desperately need it for our students of color, in the allied, in different geographies, and different age ranges that we're not serving well right now. Second, we have a workforce challenge. Every year, fewer teachers are being trained. We already can't fill positions for certain special ed needs. We hire from out of the country for our bilingual teachers, right? I'm worried about my 1-year-old not having teachers, right? We are not competitive right now as a school district. We lose almost half of our teachers in their first 5 years. We need to think differently about our workforce, and we need to do it now, not when we are literally not able to find teachers. Third, on the achievement gap, this is an issue that has plagued our district for a very long time. We need to do it differently. We need to be able to hire teachers of color. That comes back to how we treat our teachers and how we compensate our teachers, right? We need to invest in our early education system at the K through 2 level before this gap becomes too broad. And we need people on the district who are able to think about where to put resources where they matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Now we'll welcome Nikki Vandermeulen.
Hello, my name is Nikki Vandermeulen, and I'm a candidate for the Madison School Board, Seat 7. Thank Rotary for inviting me today. Yes, our schools are doing well, as Kate said and Allie said, but we have our challenges. And the reason I am running for school board is to give a voice to those students who are voiceless. I know what it's like to be treated differently in education. I've openly stated in my campaign the fact that I will be the first autistic individual on the Madison MMSD school board. I understand that education needs to be for everyone. It is not a privilege, it's a right. One way we could protect that right for everyone is to start discussing the issue of suspension and expulsion. Namely, why we are out of the people who are expelled, 61% are Black males and 35% are the disabled. The problem being is that the disabled make up 14% of the school population and African American males make up 18%. Those numbers don't lie, and we need to do things about it. One way I would address this problem is to add teeth to the behavior education plan. It's a good start, but we don't measure it properly because we don't have the right tools to. What I would do is to create a simple rubric that people could understand. If student A breaks a window and then student B also breaks a window, if the facts are the same, and we're not discussing a manifestation of a disability, but the facts are the same, then the punishment needs to be the same. To have a simple chart showing what the punishment was, so that way you could go back and look at it. It takes out the subjectivity of saying, well, this person has a history, this person doesn't. No, it should be based on the behavior at hand. And I think that's one way we could stop some of the racial issues. This also ties into the achievement gap. Kids can't learn when they're not in school. We worry about test scores, but when you have kids in the courtroom, not the classroom, they're not going to learn. I'm a juvenile attorney. I got involved in this race because I kept watching my juveniles time after time be brought into the court system. And it started with little things like disorderly conduct, things that could be handled through restorative justice in the schools, things that could be handled by a detention or even a timeout, instead of being held by a criminal misdemeanor, and we're putting kids in the juvenile court system. That's not benefiting the child. That's not benefiting society. And frankly, the amount we're spending to do so is astronomical. The other thing that I would do on the board is to provide more training to the EROs or the school resource officers. I know this is a controversial topic of having police in schools, but my issue is, very simply, if we need, right now, the way our system is, we have officers for the next 3 years, but we need to have them trained in behavior and other issues. I've had several disabled clients with behavior education plans where the school resource officers didn't even know they existed. That's not safe for the officer. That's not safe for the student. Instead, let's make it a conversation. The first thing an officer would normally do is they put their hand on you to say, hey, I understand. You do that to someone in my group who is autistic, who they don't know you, hate to say it, we're going to react and it's not going to be necessarily positive. So I think working on all these changes, both improving the school, providing more education for the school resource officers, lowering the number of suspensions and expulsions by strengthening the behavior education plan, and then working to end the achievement gap. And I ask you for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your opening statements. We'll now move to the closing round. The candidates will appear in the same order as the opening round, so I will welcome Ali back to the podium. 3 minutes, yes.
I think one of the things I'm most afraid of as we move forward, and I'm proud of our district and what it's been able to accomplish. When I went to school here, I graduated in 2005, and when I graduated, less than 50% of African American students that year graduated from high school. And the problem was that we weren't having the conversation. We weren't talking about what that meant. I was there watching my peers disappear from the classroom and the school and be absorbed into a world in which they couldn't be successful. And I think my greatest fear in what we're doing now, in our ability to have conversations about the achievement gap and racial disparities, and whether or not our schools are welcoming to LGBTQ students, and whether or not we're able to maintain the integrity of services provided to students with disabilities, is that we will aim to get better. I'm terrified that we'll go from being a community that has one of the most tremendous achievement gaps in the country to being proud of being number 4 or number 5. I would like our district to aim for the stars. I think that's how we teach our children to aim for greatness and to find greatness within themselves and others. I think we have to aim to be at the forefront of inclusion, and that's my area of expertise. That's what I've spent my entire life, my entire adult life trying to do, is to make space for students in places where they've been historically left out, where they've been unseen, to make sure our young people are not just included in their classrooms or their cafeterias, but in the books that they're reading, in the curriculum that they're using, in the research projects that they're doing, to make sure that students with disabilities are also recognized as advanced learners, that no student is seen as one-dimensional or judged by the worst mistake that they've ever made, but seen as people who have complex identities and abilities and deserve to be uplifted by their education. I think we have the ability to shoot for something incredible and to become something incredible, to separate ourselves from a history of racial difference. But I think it takes folks who are really honest about that, are really willing to have that conversation, and are really willing to apply their experience in addressing these issues to action. We have a pretty grand and gorgeous opportunity to make our schools into places where young people feel celebrated and feel empowered by learning. And that takes a commitment to working together, to listening to each other, to including diverse people within leadership. I think that we can be a community that is very honest about our history, is very honest about the challenges we're facing, and is also deeply passionate and committed to changing, to transforming, to not being better, but being at the forefront of inclusion. Thank you.
The voters in Madison have a choice to make right now. And for me, that choice breaks down into 2 parts. The first is, what are the core issues for our schools? For me, the core issues in our schools, as I laid out, first, the threats of privatization and defunding the district that serves 25,000 students right now in our city. Second, workforce challenges, low teacher morale, inability to hire teachers, inability to keep teachers. My kids, the most important thing in their day is how their teacher interacts with them. I can tell when my son comes home if he had a sub or not. It is critically important, the relationships that our students are able to build with our teachers. Third, the achievement gap. This is something that we have dealt with for a long time. We need to be better. It is unacceptable for us to be where we are. Those are the issues that I perceive. The second is how well we approach those issues. My opponent and I have difference of opinion on some of those issues. The first is around charters, and I don't think we have time to talk about it now, but we can talk about it one-on-one afterwards. The second, I believe my experience managing budgets, managing people, doing the work of the board is critical to be able to make good and hard decisions about what lies ahead. Third, my opponent has a conflict of interest that makes her ineligible to participate in choices that infect our staff. Our staff is about 85% of our budget. That's a big handcuff at a time when Scott Walker is looking at tying strings to our budget, trying to tell us how to manage our staff, our workforce, and our students. So I think there's some differences of approach. It's up to you, the voters, to make that decision. And I appreciate your listening and being here for all of us today.
As I said, I'm running to be a voice for the voiceless. I want our students to be able to learn regardless of disability, religion, race, creed. I want them to be able to understand in school and learn, and that they don't have to worry about being bullied. I want all of our students to be treated equally, but right now that's not happening. When you went out of the pool of expulsion, you suspend 61% of black males. That's not equality. When seclusion and restraint techniques, those are timeout rooms, used on autistic and disabled children are gigantic in the district, that's not equality. I want full inclusion, as Allie stated, but I want it for everyone, regardless of race, regardless of disability, so that everyone is included. Other things that I would do when I'm on the board is very simply, I want clear benchmarks in the behavior education plan. How the offense is handled, what we need to do, and what the consequences are. To have a 70-page document, which is what it currently is right now, and where we just have students receive the document, sign a form saying they read it, and that they're responsible for it, I'm sorry, that's way too much information in a way too short a time period. You wouldn't ask an attorney to memorize an entire brief in 10 minutes. How are we going to expect students to sign a document saying they'll be responsible for 70 pages of material that they may not have time to even read? We need to make the rules clear, simple, and precise. We need that for our teachers. We need that for our students. We need that for our school resource officers. Secondly, I want to increase job training and job readiness skills. We're sending our kids out. These are the best of the brightest, yet they don't have the job skills. They don't know the basics. And we need to provide that. That's done through internships with local businesses. But I want to make sure the transportation is provided on these internships. And I want to make sure they're equal in all schools. But most important to me is to get rid of the achievement gap, and the best way to do that is to focus on the behavior education plan and focus on how our students learn. Too often we focused on teaching to the test. We focused on our kids meeting a specific box. Well, we don't all fit into that box. As for private vouchers and privatization, as Kate mentioned, I would never be allowed in those voucher schools solely on the basis of disability. And so I'm really cautious about them because it's really hard to support something that you're not even allowed in the front door. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of the candidates for meeting with us today and providing your perspective. Remember, Election Day is April the 4th, and we are adjourned. Please, if you have questions, please come to the head table.